If services feel the same, why do taxes go up? Where do your tax dollars actually go? This is Property Taxes Myth versus Math. Let's take a closer look and do some myth busting. This is the Real Ridge podcast, where we share the stories behind the headlines on topics that are shaping Maple Ridge. Today, we're demystifying municipal taxes with city finance leadership, breaking down what drives costs and how decisions are made. With us today, we have Phil Sanderson, Manager of Corporate Strategy and Business Transformation. Welcome, Phil.
Hi, Dan. It's great to be here talking to you today.
It's nice and warm in here, isn't it?
It's really good on a chilly morning, I can't deny.
So why don't we just get right into it? What's the biggest myth about property taxes in Maple Ridge?
Well, for me, it's that people believe their voice doesn't matter, because trust me, it really does. We understand that everyone's really busy and we're all flooded with information every day. It can be overwhelming to try and stay up to date with what's going on in the city and what the budget process looks like. But the way your city invests really has the most profound impact on your day-to-day life. Like a friend of mine lives in Vancouver and he just called me last night. He just found out they're taking away all the parking in front of his building and he's really worried about that. The way you find out what's coming down is by paying attention to the city budget and what we're doing. And when you give us your feedback, that helps us make better decisions.
Well, can you walk us through how can a resident actually get that information? When we look on social media, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So can you walk us through how can we find the right information?
Yeah, for sure. So we work really hard throughout the year, actually. Every time we run an open house or have an information event, we're talking to you about where the city's putting those tax dollars to benefit you, whether it's a new park or a new facility. But right now, we're in the midst of budget process for sure. So we're running dedicated pop-up engagement events across different city locations, at the library, at the ACT. We're coming to Planet Ice to catch people while their kids are playing hockey and give them a chance to ask lots of questions. You can go, of course, to our website. That's probably the best place because we have all of our documents up there. It's mapleridge.ca/budget, easy to find. You can watch some of our budget talk videos. We had some new videos this year because we know that people kind of struggle to find information and know what's going on with regard to the budget. So we're trying to get as much information out there as we can. And finally, every resident is going to receive a mail out this year that gives you the sort of quick highlights of the budget in a 4-page document.
Yeah, I've seen the videos from finance, and I think they're a great step forward to helping people understand what their taxes are and how they apply in the city, which leads me to the next question.
Sure.
Where does the average tax dollar actually go?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard to parse all these tables of charts in our budget documentation sometimes. But if we think about where each dollar the city collects actually goes, just about half or 55 cents of that dollar goes straight into the programs and services that make up our core operations. So those are things like our arts and culture and recreation programs and events, the parks, the roads, the infrastructure maintenance services, and our planning and building services to help development happen. About another 35 cents on that dollar goes to major infrastructure projects and design and planning for new projects, like widening out the connection roads to Golden Ears Way or expanding Abernathy Way at each section we do. That's part of where that 35 cents goes. We want to use those dollars to reduce traffic congestions in a few key bottlenecks in the city. As well, that 35 cents covers all the building of new parks and recreation amenities and expanding and upgrading our infrastructure below the ground. That's often one people forget about because you don't sort of see it every day. So we have to replace those pipes for water and sewer and make sure that you're getting clean water out of your tap every time.
That's interesting because I know people have a tendency to want to compare other municipalities and kind of like a competition out there, who's got the best, who's got the least, and so on and so forth. But there are tremendous differences. For instance, when we look at Maple Ridge, we have over 500 kilometers of roads alone, just on the roads that we have to maintain. So when you have a pothole, imagine trying to figure out where 500 kilometers of roads and all the potholes that are in there.
Right.
And if people want to see those potholes fixed, that's part of it, right?
Absolutely, that's part of it. Our crews are out there every day finding challenges, broken pieces of sidewalk, potholes. All of that is part of what's funded through our capital plan, we call it. It's where that repair and maintenance work goes on. But it goes beyond that. It's about enabling new infrastructure and expanding our infrastructure so that we can handle the new capacity we have to do as demands on the city grow. So, yeah, that's a big part of what we have in Maple Ridge. We also have some unique challenges beyond the roads in terms of our topography and where development can happen. So a lot of our land use planning even has to be very specific to the nature of our community. It also makes it a little more costly for us to, say, manage stormwater and drainage because of the type of soil we have here and some of the unique characteristics. So all these different factors, the things we love about Maple Ridge, are also what makes it challenging sometimes for us to invest at a pace with our growth.
We talked about operations, operating dollars, what it costs to fix a road type thing, but you also mentioned capital projects. And for the viewership out there, can you walk us through what that really means? What is a capital project?
Yeah, so capital and operating, this is accounting terminology. Not everyone maybe has come across it before, and it's sometimes hard to determine which is which. Essentially, anything that's a capital project creates an asset that the city then owns forever after. And that means that something like a new recreation facility would be a capital project because we now own that asset of the facility. An operating cost would be paying for my time to actually help build the budget. That's an operating cost. It's a service that we're providing for the community.
Okay, and when we talk about what people really want to know, how important are taxes in terms of what funds services for residents?
Yeah, it's a really great question because it's like, well, why can't you find other ways to fund this work? Why am I, as a resident, having to pay for everything all the time? Well, property taxes really are critical to keep the city running and maintain our quality of life here. About every 53 cents of every dollar of total revenue comes from that tax source. So we get revenue from all different types of sources. We get about 30 cents on the dollar from the user fees and charges we have. So when someone comes in to do a swim class, they pay a fee. When they do a development application, we get about 30 cents on the dollar for revenue from that. But about 50%, over half of our budget, comes from the tax revenue. So it's an important contributor to what we do. The other parts of our revenue come from development cost charges. So developers who are going to benefit from building new buildings and housing in this community pay some costs to fund that infrastructure as well. And then finally, we get revenue from grants and other sources from other levels of government, for instance.
Interesting. So when we talk about property taxes, I could go back 30 years and open any newspaper,
Mhm.
and you're always going to see the same top three challenges. It's high property taxes, no infrastructure, traffic congestion. Those are always seems to be the top items. And even 30 years ago, people were saying, why are my taxes going up? Why are my taxes going up? And it seems that taxes do go up every year. Can you walk us through what would cause the property tax to go up? We talked about some infrastructure. We talked about operating. What else could make property taxes go up?
Yeah, it can sure feel that way sometimes that we're just continuously increasing. It's hard to see all the changes that are happening behind the scenes that are making that happen for us. So there are several things that affect the tax rate each year. Obviously, the most important one is what are property values in the community doing? So as BC Assessment does their analysis of all the different properties in the community, that changes the average property tax for each person. But in terms of what's driving the cost side of the ledger for us, we have some things that look a lot like what happens for regular people. There are costs outside our control that determines how far your paycheck goes, right? So for us, that looks like mandatory cost increases built into our labor contracts that happen year on year. There's also the rising cost of construction and materials and equipment that we have for all of those big projects we're doing to improve our roads and improve the buildings we provide for the citizens. We also have, in some cases, made deliberate choices to increase our staffing to boost service levels. So, for example, this council years ago made the decision to add more police and fire and bylaw officers because we recognize the importance and how much residents were telling us. So this comes back to the Your Voice Matters. People told us they didn't feel like there was enough effort there. So Council approved us to actually hire more staff dedicated to public safety, which is great for the community, but it does increase our costs over time. And then finally, we have increasing regulatory requirements imposed on us by other levels of government. So when the province changed the rules about housing and how we actually approve development here, that created extra kind of bureaucracy and time for us to adjust bylaws and adjust other work. So that all adds cost into the process for us. So we need to be understanding that there's a whole bunch of different factors that no one council can control in all cases. Obviously, we're always looking for efficiency. So at the same time that those factors are negatively impacting us, we're always trying to boost other revenue to offset those costs. We're also looking at efficiency in how the city actually delivers the service. So we have a Center for Continuous Improvement here at Maple Ridge, and my team works on that. And it's a great way for us to find savings and improve our processes so that they're more efficient, take less time for us, but also for residents, and deliver savings. So we looked at the last 6 months, we've found almost $200,000 in savings just by improving processes and making ourselves more efficient at what we do.
And I talked earlier about looking in a newspaper 30 years ago and some of the challenges that are very similar to today. Can you walk us through perhaps 30 years ago, what was the provincial government and the federal government funding that they're no longer funding?
Yeah, this is a great example. So I talked about changing regulatory requirements. At the same time, provinces and federal government are changing their policy about what programs and services they support. And in that case, it creates a vacuum where the municipality has to kind of fill the gap sometimes. So definitely we've seen a decrease in some of the programs for vulnerable residents, that we're having more and more people who are struggling with housing and social disorder and experience homelessness. And that creates costs for us in managing that interface and helping support folks. I think there's also a lot of programs that the province and the federal government used to have to put core infrastructure into communities. And now a lot more of that burden for that actually sits on municipalities. So that's really changed in the last couple of decades.
So a lot of that has been downloaded to the municipalities, and really there's only a couple of ways that the municipality can get the funds to do that. They can apply for federal grants, they can apply for provincial grants, which are getting smaller and smaller, and those opportunities are drastically being reduced. So we have to either raise property taxes or get money through DCCs, development cost charges. Is there any other way that we get money?
Well, really, the only other way is fee for service. So we try and be fair with our residents and say that there are some things that everyone benefits from. So having safe roads is one of them. But there are some things that maybe I don't always use. I live in Maple Ridge. I've lived here for 25 years. I haven't used the leisure center that much personally. I'm not the sort of person that works out. But I want the community to have a great leisure center that kids and families can come work out and have a swim in. So I'm happy to pay my property taxes for that amenity to be available for us. But yeah, we can only have so many ways of collecting revenue, and fees is probably really the only other way we can do it other than grants. But as you say, the competition among municipalities to get those few federal and provincial dollars that are in these programs now is more fierce than ever.
It's interesting because you mentioned the leisure center, which was in its day quite a great piece of infrastructure with the pools and the gym and everything that it has to offer. But that is an aging infrastructure. Not only is it aging, but our population since then has skyrocketed dramatically. If you look 10 years ago, we were probably sitting in a neighborhood of 60,000 population. Here we are today. This year, we're likely going to break 110, which means a lot more people want to use those types of services, which now means that you're overloaded, overcrowded on our recreational facilities, such as the leisure center or the arenas or any other facilities that we have. So how does that play into this?
Well, it definitely is an experience that a lot of residents probably have, trying to get their kid into a swim class or trying to get into the gym to work out or to come and use a sports field for their local hockey team or their soccer team. So it definitely plays a role. I mean, if you think about we've got more families, more cars on the same roads, that same 500 kilometers of road, that means more maintenance. That means more cost for us to keep that safe and everyone moving the way we want. So it definitely plays a role in that growth. It puts more pressure on the existing infrastructure that's already, like the leisure center, coming towards the end of its life. Like we put that in many, many years ago. The buildings only last so long, roads only last so long. So we have to start planning for the future. So it's a double-edged sword, really, of not only do we have to spend a bit more maintaining that aging infrastructure, but we have to start investing even more money now so that as we continue to grow, which is great, we love the vibrancy of the community increasing from all this growth, but we want to make sure that we have facilities into the future that people aren't having to line up to get into and that people could come and enjoy anytime they want.
And I guess 30 years ago, building a new aquatic center or a leisure center would be significantly cheaper than it is today.
Oh, yeah.
Then how do you respond to residents that say, well, do we really need to fix the road today? Can we push that down the line? How does that play into this?
Well, that's a great example where why your voice matters. Because I would say the number one thing we've heard this year, we had a community survey in the fall of 2025. The number one thing that came out that continually annoys folks is the traffic congestion. Like I said, more people on the same roads. And from what our community is telling us, that is kind of number one for us to be investing in. So we do have to prioritize that. We can't just continue to let things not be maintained and more problems happen. Because, for example, if we don't continue to fix our sidewalks and build the cycling and active transportation network that people are asking us to build, then we're going to have more claims and more costs from the city. If people who maybe have mobility challenges and we aren't kind of fixing potholes and fixing sidewalks, we're going to incur costs either way. So we want to make sure we're staying ahead of that and staying on top of that. And we do that through the budget by funding that repair and maintenance work, but also funding the building the new and expanding and enabling them to grow. But you're right, it's a balancing act we have to do, and it's about figuring out, based on community feedback, what's the most important thing to do at any given time. There's only so long that you can kick the can down the road, so to speak, about investing in these big things.
And of course, we all have our jurisdictions.
Right.
And I know when I talk with the grade 4s, 5, 6, 7, one of the things we talk about our jurisdiction, because we can't be responsible for federal matters. We can't be responsible for provincial matters. And as an example, the Golden Ears Way, all the way up to 210th, while in Maple Ridge, actually doesn't belong to Maple Ridge. It belongs to TransLink. Some say in 2009, when they built the bridge, they should have widened that entranceway as well, but it didn't happen. And in the long-term budget, they were saying, well, it's got to reach capacity first. Totally not within our control. And yet, what we as a city can do and have done is the advocacy. And not only advocacy, putting pressure on the organizations for them to realize we can't wait for this. And we had some good news earlier this year. What's that good news?
Well, the great news is we were able to leverage some funding we had in our budget to actually unlock additional TransLink funding. So we'd been advocating, as you said, multiple meetings with TransLink to try and get this Golden Ears Way widening approved. As you said, when they originally built the bridge, they didn't think about that connection. And it's kind of like, if you think about like when they build a school, you almost have to have way too many kids before they'll bother investing in another school. Same kind of thing with the bridge. They said, well, we'll build a bridge and then we'll see what happens. But what the city's been trying to do for many years, and we've finally been successful in, is using a little bit of our own money and said, we'll do some initial design work. We'll help fund some design work to make that road widening happen. And now TransLink's come to the party, and we have a new agreement that they're going to actually start working on that project this year and make it happen for us to widen that road. And as you said, this is a provincial road. It's going to connect to our local roads in a new way, and it really marries up beautifully with the work we've been doing with the Abernethy Way extension and widening there too. So now we'll have much better flow coming on and off the Golden Ears Bridge every day.
So just to stay on this subject a little bit longer, it's been said before that, oh yeah, it's going to happen. And residents haven't seen that.
Right.
Why is this time any different? How can residents believe that the widening expansion is going to happen?
Well, I think two things I would say. One is we actually have an agreement in place that they're going to do what we've asked them to do, which is always important. You got to get it in writing. But it's also that council is going to continue to put that pressure on. We don't stop advocating once we get that initial agreement. We're going to keep pushing this forward. And we've proven by the fact that previous councils and this council have made investments in our own local roads that we're going to be ready for it when they come. So part of the argument with TransLink is, well, you do your bit and then we'll think about our bit of the road. We're ready. We're ready to go. We're putting that pressure on by making those investments, and it makes it a lot harder for the province to slow walk things and to take time. So we're pretty confident this time that this is going to happen.
And I just want to add into that because I know I've seen them taking the measurements out there and they're measuring everything and they're preparing it.
Yep.
But one of the biggest differences is in the past, TransLink has always said, yeah, we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. We just don't have the money to do it. Now they've committed the funds to do it. The money is there and they're working on it. So when the drawings are done, then they'll go to tender and then they'll start construction. So that could be as early as later on, late this year or early 2027. The difference is, regardless of who's around after the next election, the deal is done and they are moving forward with it. And that's exciting for our residents because that's probably one of the number one issues I hear when I'm on the streets and talking to folks. Okay, let's go a little bit in a different direction. Our residents they probably have an idea. Our tax base is about 93% of residential homeowners. That is an enormous burden on our residential owners because we're not talking a population of 110. We're talking on households. And that number is mid 30,000. So the work for the city, the money that comes from property taxes, come from about 34,000 households. That's an incredible amount. And that's been that way for quite some time. So let's get into that. Let's talk about why the tax burden is on residential. Let's start with there.
Sure. So Maple Ridge has a great business community here. We have a lot of little startup businesses and some that have been in business for 30, 40, even 50 years, but they're small as a proportion relative to the population. So as you said, around 35,000 households carry the biggest burden of property taxes. We do collect, obviously, commercial and industrial taxes as well. But because the number of those businesses and the scale of them is small relative to the total population, we do rely heavily on the residents. But the good news is we have been for several years, but we're even more this year focused on attracting and retaining new businesses in Maple Ridge. And what that means is we build the conditions to make it desirable for businesses to move here, to relocate here, and to grow here. And so our economic development team and our investment attraction team are running a million miles an hour. And in fact, they have an event coming up next week to really catalyze, and it's called the Igniter event for businesses. And it's about encouraging people to think differently about how they can do business here in Maple Ridge and the type of businesses we need to broaden out that tax base. Because businesses receive services from the city as well. They're benefiting just as much, sometimes more than residents, from what we're delivering in terms of that infrastructure. We help them get their goods back and forth by maintaining those roads. That's just one example. So what we're trying to do is really build out a new strategy for investment here in the community. We're doing great about attracting film businesses here and building out that arts and culture ecosystem for those kinds of businesses. We also want to really stimulate agribusiness and biotech type businesses that can really operate here. We have some great conditions for businesses to operate here, but I think Maple Ridge maybe has been flying under the radar for a few years. So not all of the business community here in the Lower Mainland really understands the advantage of doing business here. And now with the Golden Ears Way, with our train connections and whatnot, there's some real advantages to locating here. So the more we can attract businesses, the more we can grow the businesses we do have, the less of that burden sits on residential taxes.
Okay, so let's tie that now to we need to attract businesses. I think we've always been saying that we need to attract more businesses. But if you're a business, so let's start with a very basic one. Do municipalities build shopping centers?
Definitely not.
Do municipalities build housing?
No.
No, these are the purview of either provincial mandated like BC Housing or private, right?
The private sector, yeah.
So we can't make that happen. So it then comes down to if you're a business owner and you're in another area, you're looking to expand your business. You look at the landscape across the Lower Mainland. Where do you want to go? Who offers good value for their money and who offers the best chance of actually being profitable, right? And I'll give you an example is we do have a lot of these businesses that are up and coming. We had recently installed the North Shore bike track out east of Albion. And it's a well-known, popular place. So they've chosen Maple Ridge to come here and do business. So somewhere when that owner made a decision to come here, they would have looked at the conditions, the business conditions, the residential conditions. Do they have enough clients to keep them busy? So when you have a unique opportunity like that, and they've chosen Maple Ridge, that's an exciting prospect. So how do we continue to draw in? I know we have investment attractions, but that might be not what people are connecting with. So let's break it down to its simplest form. If I want to come to Maple Ridge to do business, what am I looking for?
So generally speaking, what a lot of businesses are looking for is they want to understand where they can locate. So helping them find the right site that has the conditions for them. So that might look different if I have a manufacturing business or if I have a retail business. So actually helping with the site selection and making it easy for you to find a site that works for you. Understanding what the employee mix is here. We help walk people through the type of employees they can expect to find in Maple Ridge, because the more we can create local employment, the better for the community as well. So we're hitting two goals there in one. We're attracting a business who can employ local people, and those local people can live and work and play here all without having to commute to other communities. So we're helping them find employees, we're helping them find locations, we're helping them understand what the local network of businesses are like, because it's really important in some sectors to have kind of a cluster or a community of similar businesses. It really helps their profitability. But it's all about understanding those conditions that are specific for each sector. And so one of the things we have a lot of here in Maple Ridge, and we're looking to attract even more of, is those professional and technical kind of services businesses. They don't need a lot of infrastructure in terms of big warehouses or manufacturing. They're mostly in offices, but they're high value, highly skilled employees, which is great to attract to our community. And they run often consulting businesses or small businesses that can locate in office buildings. And that's an area we want to grow in Maple Ridge and have more professional services type buildings. Because when you bring those folks, you're also bringing the sort of people who want really good quality housing and who love recreation amenities. So often it's also about, there are some sectors, for instance, we wouldn't easily attract to Maple Ridge because they require a big pool of, science graduates out of a university. They're probably going to locate closer to Vancouver or UBC because we don't have a university pool creating those students here. So there are some, we have to look at the specific conditions in Maple Ridge. And our job in economic development is to help connect with those businesses, make them take a look at Maple Ridge in the first place, because maybe they haven't thought of us before, and then explain to them those specific advantages we have that are relevant for their industry. And it's a long-term process. You can't build industries overnight. You can't build clusters overnight because, as you say, the private sector makes its choices based on cost and a whole bunch of other factors. And to be fair, we're going to see some tough times in the current cycle. People are probably well aware of the challenges in a lot of the economic sectors right now because of tariffs and other things. The good news for us is businesses are trying to really stimulate business here in Canada. They want to locate their business here in Canada, and particularly here in the Lower Mainland, where we have good connections to major centers and ports. So there's lots of advantages we can talk to with businesses, but it is a longer term process, and it has to be specific to the type of business that's good for us, but also makes sense for that business.
Yeah, if you break it down to its simplest form, a new coffee shop opens up.
Yeah.
At the very minimum, just to break even, you're looking at least 100 customers a day. But if all of your residents are traveling outside the city to do work or to go shop somewhere else, that means they're not here spending money in our local shops. And that's one of the reasons why we created the Shop Local campaign, was to draw attention to the amazing businesses that we do have here then that are opening up. I mean, aside from renewals, we've had over 900 new business applications, which is phenomenal. So there's a connection there. When we talk about trying to densify the downtown core, the more you densify that downtown core, the more broad of a customer base. So you can easily get that 100 customers a day as an example. But I want to jump to something that I hear quite often, and it really needs some myth busting.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm throwing a curveball at you. I often hear you need to stop building homes. You need to stop building everything until we catch up on infrastructure.
Okay.
On the surface, one would say, well, yeah, okay, makes sense. We're lacking in infrastructure, so why are we focusing on building homes? So let's talk about that.
So first off, I'd come back to something you said just a little minute ago. The city doesn't build homes. We create the conditions. The market decides that there's a demand for homes, and we know that there is a housing crisis in Canada. People need safe, happy, comfortable places to live, and Maple Ridge is a great place to build. As you said, we also want to densify our downtown core, and our area planning's been focused on that, partly because of a downloaded mandate from the provincial government, but also partly because it's good for Maple Ridge. It creates that vibrancy in the downtown core that brings businesses here. And we can't stop building housing. Like, the community is going to continue to grow because a lot of people are choosing to come live in Maple Ridge, and that's a great thing. We want that. But at the same time, it does put pressure. So it all comes back to that point when we were talking about earlier of balancing the priorities and the costs for the municipality, maintaining what we have while we continue to grow. There's never going to be, it's kind of like building the plane while you're flying it. There's never going to be a good time where we can just stop everything else and focus on one thing at a time. Because as a city, there's always a lot going on at any given time, and we have to fund multiple things at once.
So let's just take that example. Let's just stop building housing for a moment. We shut down our planning department and we're not going to build anything unless it's infrastructure related. How would that look? Where then would the money come from? Because when we develop a property, when a developer comes to us and says, I want to build this, it's not free. They pay for some of that development for infrastructure, whether it be sidewalks, whether it be a project that's part of that DCCs. So when we do a development, we approve a development, there's funds that come in. Where do those funds go?
They go directly into the infrastructure that supports that local growth. So, for instance, when a developer comes in and builds a new community hub or a new set of housing, they may be funding the little park that goes in that community. They may be funding the sidewalks, not just for that little neighborhood, but for the surrounding area, because it's now increased the volume of traffic going into the surrounding area. So there is a direct correlation between those development cost charges. And let's say we paused our planning and development services. We might save $1 million or $2, but we're going to lose about $15 million by not having that development coming into the community. Just in 1 year, we would lose a lot of money.
Yeah, that is crazy actually when you think about it, but they're in tandem. They have to go together. When we build a park or when we build infrastructure, like we're working right now on the widening of Abernathy from 232nd to 240th. There's only a couple of places, as we said before, where that money comes from. So if we don't have DCCs from development and we don't have more applications coming in, then that's a pool of money that is not there anymore, which would prevent us from doing that critical work.
What would prevent us, or even worse, property taxes for the rest of the residents would have to go up again. So it's a zero-sum game. It's got to come from somewhere if we want to keep maintaining and growing our city.
And that's the key question. Do we want to keep maintaining and growing our city? And I want to bring this all back to the business and the industrial aspect of Maple Ridge. The more that you densify, the more pool of people that are there that are ready to shop locally. And that allows you to be more attractive to businesses. And when we look at Maple Ridge, what better place to live, work, and play? So on one side, that's exciting. On the other side, the constant, I got to pay my taxes. My taxes are going up. And here's the thing. If we look at the last 2 decades, I don't know if you'll know this one, what's the average increase over the last, say, 20 years, every year?
It's about 4%. So not too far off what we're aiming for this year. So we've managed to find some savings this year, and we're aiming for about a 3.5% tax rate. So it's ranged between about that and about 4.2 or 4.3. So we're in that 4% range for the last 20 years. The math is what it is. It's like it's a formula. The amount of people, the amount of work we have to do, and how we can achieve what the council has set as their priorities.
So when people are listening or trying to comprehend this, and it's a math question really, but when we look at the money coming in that goes to build that critical infrastructure, and we look at the last 2 decades, average tax rate is 4%.
To everyone, yeah.
One would ask, well, what am I getting for this 4%? What did I get for that 4% tax increase 20 years ago? What did I get for that 4% tax increase 10 years ago? When we look at it today, one of our first budgets, when other communities were doing 10, 12% increases, ours was 6.5%. That's because we caught up with firefighters and with police, because we know that was one of the top 3. Public safety was top 3, but we were not in a position to protect our city from fires. So we increased the budget by 6.5%, which allowed us to play catch up and allowed us to now have our fire halls fully staffed 24/7. And that's a benefit to the community, everybody. So we have, when things go wrong, we're able to respond quickly. So what has changed though? Because if ours last year, our tax rate was 4.9, this year is going to be 3.5. What has changed? Have we been cutting back services or have we been increasing services? Like, can you help us understand that?
Sure thing. So it's a complicated mix. So basically, what we do every year is we look at the bottom line. We look at what we budgeted in the previous year and what we actually spent. And so we were able to identify that in some cases, there were areas where we hadn't anticipated enough cost and others where we had estimated too much. So we had some surplus there. So we're always reinvesting that surplus to try and bring down the burden on the taxpayers for the next year. So that's number one. But this year, we really went on a line-by-line review exercise, and we went through every budget item, and we said, what is the right level to maintain at a minimum the existing service level? And so this year, that 3.5 represents a status quo, no cuts to service level to get to 3.5%. We did that by finding savings across different departments where we had maybe over budgeted in previous years and didn't really have the actual costs we expected to have. And we evened it out so that the budget areas we went over budget on, we make sure we've got enough for those, but we haven't overestimated what we need in other areas. So finding savings that way was a really important part of getting to 3.5% this year. The other thing we did is we also looked at where we can source other revenue. And so we've increased the revenue we're getting for service use in the community so that the people who get the benefit most directly are paying their share of that. And so we've been able to increase our revenue at the same time we've found cost savings. And that the two of those together are what helps us get to this number.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that's important for folks to understand. But I'm going to give you an example. So we talked about fire, we talked about police. What we didn't talk about was we've had a lot of vacancies over the years that we haven't been able to fill. And those taxes have been collected to hire those people, but they weren't ever hired because it was kind of difficult. People didn't really want to necessarily work here. That we've changed that. We've changed the culture, which is great. But when we look at the example of doing something in-house rather than contracting it out, let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest areas of savings we had for, say, our recreation services department. So this is the department involved in running all the leisure centers, the community centers, and all of our arts and culture programming. What we had used to do was we would contract out to trainers and yoga teachers and all of that kind of stuff. They've went through a full review of their program, and now we're delivering more and more of those services in-house so that we are actually saving money by doing that. As well, we had previously contracted out delivery of service through the ACT, the Art Center here in Maple Ridge, and we've now brought that in-house, and that will enable us to also save money over time because we'll have more control over how that program works, and we'll be able to generate more revenue through that program as well. So again, it's getting that balance right. It's for any business, it's all about the bottom line. You've got costs, you've got revenue, you've got to get that balance right so that we have the money we need to run the services that the city is asking for, that our residents need, and we make deliberate choices like that, as you say, where it actually saves us money to bring something in-house rather than have contracted service provider do it for us. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't want to replace the private sector. If there are private sector folks out there doing a great job for us and we contract out a lot of work in different ways around maintenance and repair as well, we're going to continue to do that because we want to support a vibrant local private sector as well. But it's about making the right choices about what the best services are that should be delivered by municipal staff versus others. And I just want to come back to your point about the vacancies too. There's a lot of competition in the Lower Mainland right now, and partly this relates to the provincial legislation as well. So in the planning area, for instance, that was an area where we really struggled to attract some staff for a while, and we were understaffed for several years in a row because every municipality was competing for the few graduates in planning and the few experienced folks. We have now hired up and staffed up those departments, and so our processing times are coming down, and we're able to do that more efficiently now because we have enough staff to deliver those services. And we have also changed our assumptions about vacancy rates. So anyone who's run a business might understand that when you budget for a year, you're going to assume a certain portion of time when staff won't be in place because it takes you a while to recruit people. That's part of that vacancy assumption we used to have. We've reduced that, and that again saved us some cost, enables us to reduce the budget tax rate because it's all about filling in the gaps in terms of making sure that we're not overestimating how much budget we'll need in a given year.
Okay, and for an example, we've seen over the last year, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, some pretty serious water main breaks.
Oh, yeah.
We experienced one here last year down by Dudney and Lohita at 203rd. And it was on the afternoon on the weekend, and the water main broke and with fountains of water coming out. It was our people who responded within the first 20 minutes when we got the call.
That's correct. Yeah.
Did we have to call out to contractors to come in and fix the problem?
That's an imperfect example of where our operations team has dedicated staff there 24/7 for any issues like that. So that was city staff going out with our equipment that we've purchased over the years. So we've invested in equipment that we need to deal with these emergency issues. And they were out within 20 minutes, as you say, on the road fixing that issue.
For me, that was exciting to see, especially as mayor, that we were open for traffic the Monday morning. We were ready to go, even though we had to work with Fortis, and we actually used our equipment to help them get their job done as well. But for me, that's the capacity that the city has. And I'll give you one more example, and I love talking about this, is we're mandated to drive every single road X amount of times a year. We have 500 kilometers of road. So what do? We drive the roads, we have somebody with a clipboard, and they're making notes on each road. What do they see? What needs to get done? Very time consuming, not very efficient because no control over what they're doing. And, their eyesight only will see so much. So we invested into a software program, which was to me amazing. So now they're still driving the street, but they have this camera in front of the car, which is recording over 300 different types of inventory pieces. So if a sign is missing, it automatically captures that. Say, hey, there used to be a sign here. If there's a pothole, it automatically records that. And then by the end of the shift, it goes into the system and the system starts to generate, okay, you need to go, here are the priorities, you need to go fix A, B, C, D. And that's a wonderful way of looking at how efficiencies help us get better at what we do.
The city invests in technology every year to do exactly that. So what we call our enabling investments, they're things like that. So instead of having 3, 4, 5 going out on a road and writing down manually something, we have a system like that that's really automated to make sure that the information is getting to us as quickly as we can, and we're actually planning that into our capital repairs and maintenance. And that's another good example back to our first question of the first big budget myth of that's why your voice matters as well, because we also have our reporter concern line. So we get a lot of intelligence from people on issues that are popping up in the community by people actually going online and reporting a concern and telling us, hey, I drove past this street today and I saw this missing or that broken and I need your help with that. So it's an important example of how it's a positive feedback loop. We always are in conversation with city residents, whether they're calling us on the phone or going on our website or coming into the city hall. We want to hear what people need and where they're seeing issues, and we do our best to respond as quickly as possible.
In this world of social media, often I don't really go on social media, but the reality is, yes, I'm on social media and I'm watching and I'm listening. And I wouldn't say it's funny, but when I come across a picture that a resident has taken and is pointing out something not right, something that's bad or something that has broken, there are times where I'm literally moving my phone, upside down, like, where is this location? I can't figure it out. And if I don't know where the location is, I can't send anybody to fix it. So I know we have a way to report that. Talk about that one.
So our reporter concern line is exactly that. So you can call in or go online and give us the address location of where your issue is. If you want, you can send us photos. That's a great help for us to find exactly what's going on. And that will go into our works group and they will go out and send someone to take a look.
Okay. So for me, this is how city can control their costs, how they can be more efficient, and how we can serve our community better. I know we're coming to the end of our time, but I have one very big one that it's the elephant in the room that we do need to talk about. And I know you don't know what I'm talking about yet because I'm just going to throw it at you. We often hear that we have the highest taxes around, and that normally is followed by, and we don't even get garbage removal.
Yes, this one.
Okay, so I'm just going to put that one in your lap and go for it.
Okay, so yes, you're correct. The city does not have municipal garbage pickup in the neighborhood. So we have, through our contract with Recycle BC now, the ability to have your recycling picked up in the neighborhood. In fact, today was pickup day for me in Albion. They did a great job this morning, came and took away all my recyclables. But a couple of years back, we had a referendum on the ballot during the election, and we offered the opportunity for residents to say, would you be willing to have a slight increase in cost to have residential garbage pickup? And unfortunately, this is again where we were listening to the community. The overwhelming answer was no.
That happened twice.
Yes.
It went to the public, and twice the public said no.
That's correct. So when we have to listen to that, if people don't want their taxes going up, so the majority of people, let's say, don't want taxes going up to get residential garbage pickup, then we listened to that and we did not fund that. However, we do a lot of support for Maple Ridge Recycling Society and make it as easy as possible for people to take their garbage to the local landfill and to get that handled.
So now that's really interesting because we talk about listening to the public. And from past experiences here, I can tell you federal elections, about 65% have shown up to vote. Provincial, that number sits at about 56%, around there. When it comes to municipal, it's traditionally under 30%.
Unfortunately, that's true.
In 2022, it was 22%. So while we say we listen to the public and we ask them for their input, if the majority of the public is not voting, how does that play?
Well, I can't speak highly enough about that because one of the most important duties I have as a resident is to vote. It's an entitlement. It's a right of mine to influence. I'm not going to sit in city council every day if I'm just a regular resident. I've got a family and a job, and I've got to do my day-to-day life. But I make a choice once every 4 years of, am I electing people that I'm confident share my values, that are going to do the things that I would want to have happen in my community? So voting is one of the most important ways that you can contribute to what happens in the city, and that has a direct impact on the budget and the property taxes you're going to pay. Because if you vote a council that doesn't think about the long term, let's say, and only wants to make people happy in the short term and keeps its taxes like 1% or 0% for years and years, what's that going to do? It's going to drive the city into the ground because we're not able to invest to keep the community how you'd want it. So it's really important to get out the vote, and it's very hard for municipalities to do that. People, as I said at the beginning, like they think about, who's the prime minister at any given time, and don't get me wrong, that's important too. But cities have the most direct effect on your day-to-day life in a lot of ways. So I'm a big proponent of that, and it's really important to stay engaged with what council's doing because they're acting on your behalf. They're there for you. And so voting is one of the biggest things you can do to affect what your property taxes are going to look like, ironically. And then there's all the other ways of actually giving us feedback when we come and ask, and we're putting out the budget documents so that folks can take a look at where the council's directed us to invest, can tell us what you think about that and whether you think it aligns with your values and what you want to see happening in Maple Ridge or not. And then we'll take that feedback. And it might not change the rate this year, but it certainly might affect us going forward and making different choices in the future.
And when we look at the thoughts behind this, say that we listen to residents, that's a myth in itself because you can talk to 100 people and get 100 different directions. You can talk to 1,000 people and get 100 different directions. Does asking for feedback equate to the final decision? And how does it equate to the final decision?
It's a really good thing to unpack because it can feel like, well, I told you something and nothing seemed to change. So what the heck's going on? It does have an impact, but at a general level. Like if Bob tells me one thing and Judy tells me another thing and they're totally opposite, that's a bit of a challenge for us. So that's why we aggregate and average out the feedback and look at it from the perspective of what are people in a given neighborhood saying versus the city as a whole, because some things affect neighborhoods differently. And so the importance on one neighborhood might be a bit different than the other. So yes, it's not a one-to-one line between I'm Phil and I went to a budget engagement and I said, I want a lacrosse field here next year. And that didn't happen. So now I'm annoyed. Fair enough. I'm annoyed because I like lacrosse and I want to have a lacrosse field. But what it tells us is that sports are a priority for you and having recreation for your kids is a priority for you. So it might show up in other ways. And maybe lacrosse isn't what we invest in this year because we've already planned to expand a soccer field or a baseball diamond. And that's where the money's going this year. But we plan over the long term too. So even though you might not see it change this year, it might change next year or the year after that. So getting that information to us is still critically important.
Well, Phil, I could go on and on and on about this, but I know our time is come to an end. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come and share some of the myth busting about taxes. And just want to thank you for all the work that you've done. I know since you've been here, you've been a great addition to Maple Ridge. And I think we'll look forward to the short-term future and the long-term vision of Maple Ridge.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's been great. Have a great day.
Thank you.